The Soviet Union was a socialist union spanning 11 different time zones and covering the entirety of Northern Asia and much of Eastern Europe. A union forged through toughness and grit, people who were accustomed to multiple environments and landforms. A country that would instill fear in the hearts of all of its opponents. When this union decided to acquire some Finnish land, they didn't count on one man taking on the entire Soviet Union. In this episode of Badasses from History, we look at Simo, considered by most to be the deadliest sniper to have ever lived. In a small rural town on the border of Finland, we find a boy holding a pellet gun tightly. He focuses intensely on the target as blood rushes to his head. He knew he could make the shot. He'd practiced hundreds of times. This is easy. He loosened his grip slightly, letting his sweaty palms dry in the cold air snapping at his fingertips. He breathed out slowly, then pulled the trigger. Shot made. It was inevitable. As they placed the medal on his neck, he knew he was destined for more. The pride he felt was like a drug. He wanted more. He wanted to hunt a moving target. Rautiaravi didn't make weak men. The cold, harsh environments created soldiers. Soldiers who would lay their lives on the line at the snap of a finger. The highest honor was to serve for the Finnish army. He had been taught that from a very young age. Every ounce of his being knew that he wanted to be the best at shooting. He understood it. It made sense to him. Simo was born on the 17th of December 1905. He grew up and started farming, enjoying many hobbies at the same time, such as shooting and ice skiing. After years of winning every competition being offered to him, sometimes travelling miles to win these competitions, he decided he had had enough of playing pretend and took the step of joining the White Guard, or the Saulaskunta, a voluntary militia that had defeated the Red Guards 2 years prior as part of the Whites in the Finnish Civil War of 1918. This militia was named due to their vehement opposition of communist Red Guards. Simo took to his position quite quickly, absorbing every ounce of knowledge being offered to him. He took every bit of sniper training he could manage, finding them easier and easier as time progressed. His fondness of target shooting earmarked him for greatness. His dedication for the art of war meant he celebrated his 34th birthday on the Kulla battlefield. He garnered the attention of some higher-ups and he was promoted to corporal. During his time training, he had used many guns. None spoke to him as much as his issued Civil Guards rifle, an early series Seiko M2830, which was essentially a variant of the Mosin Nagant rifle, otherwise known as the Pitskova or the Spitz. This particular weapon sealed the fate of over 500 Red soldiers in under 100 days. He enjoyed this weapon, as he had practiced with it for years. He knew every inch of its body. He knew how to clean it and how to use it and how reliable it was. A shadow bobbed up and down in the distance. Was it a soldier or simply a piece of wood? Simo pondered, as he sunk deeper into his makeshift trench, adjusting the stand on his rifle in the same motion. In times like this, he thinks back to his commander's comments. "Telescopic sights are better. You can see what you're shooting," he would shout, shaking his head in annoyance. Simo never argued. He knew the logic behind his decision made sense. The art of being a sniper is not one he took lightly. He studied every aspect of the job, every way he could kill, and every way he could be killed. A glint, a shadow in the distance, blurred vision. These are all things that can cause a sniper to lose his life. He hated telescopic sights. He knew they would reflect in the cold winter days, and that's all the enemy needs. A mistake, a slip-up, a lack of respect, and his commander would be dragging his lifeless body back. Hauha thought more about scopes as he glared at his soon-to-be prey, bob up and down. His head would be more visible if he'd been looking through a scope right now. He wasn't going to make it that easy for them. The shadow stopped bobbing. As the shadow came closer to Simo, he began to stuff snow in his mouth and prepared to do what he was born to do. The move didn't make much sense to his comrades, but he knew how well hidden he was. Nothing would compromise his position. His hot breath would not be the cause of his demise. Squeezing the trigger, he knew he succeeded. As the shadow fell, he thought, one soldier down, hundreds more to go. So before we get into the number of kills, let me explain the magnitude of this feat. So an American study found that an average of 7,000 rifle caliber shots were needed to achieve about one combat kill on average during the First World War. Now, as I list the number of kills by White Death, try to keep account of how many shots were needed according to this study. The first 22 days of the Winter War caused a frenzy within Simo Hauha to wake up. His fellow soldiers counted his kills. In the first 22 days, they counted 138 confirmed sniper kills. The following 35 days was 61 more kills. And the last 22 days was 20 more kills. Were you counting? If you did count, the number that you should have come up with was 13,550,000 bullets. However, Hauha was just as proficient with a submachine gun as he was with the rifle, killing just as many soldiers with that gun as he had done with his rifle. So this led Svensson to award Hauha with an honorary rifle Model 28, which he's proudly pictured with. They called him White Death. He hated the name. It put a bigger target on his back. He knew the reason behind it. Propaganda can end this war. It wasn't enough to kill these invaders. They had to win the war of hearts too. White Death became something the Soviets feared and actively sought to end. In the mad scramble effort to end the life of this White Death, causing Soviet soldiers to desert their post, Soviets used counter-snipers and artillery strikes. Two particular instances spring to mind when thinking of the Russians' efforts to end his life. On one occasion, after Hauha had once again killed an enemy sniper with a single shot, the Russians in turn tried to kill him by shooting indirect fire. A mortar bombardment at the vicinity of his firing position. Incredibly, Hauha was not wounded or killed, making it out without a scratch. On another occasion, an artillery shell landed near his firing position and tore apart the back of his greatcoat. Hauha survived this with only a minor scratch to his back. This man was indestructible. Hauha's skill was compounded by his extensive preparations for shooting. During the night, he would often visit his favorite firing position, making whatever preparations and improvements he felt necessary. His behavior might be described as obsessive because of his dedication to the job at hand. He would clean his weapon much more often than most soldiers, and perform both maintenance operations before and after completing a mission. Especially in the -20-degree temperatures of the Finnish winter, proper gun maintenance was essential to avoid it jamming. Hauha's father had taught him a very important hunter's skill, the ability to estimate distances. This was not a skill he was born with. He had lots of practice, first by estimating the distance to a target and then pacing out by steps. In most cases, his estimate was almost perfect. When checking out his estimate, a typical variation from the actual distance was 1 or 2 steps either way at distances of approximately 150 meters. As a young man, he also learned to estimate the effects of wind and rain on shooting conditions in forest. On the 6th of March 1940, he made a mistake. He didn't take every precaution he could, and the Red soldiers made sure he paid the price. It was just another day in the winter forests of Finland. He knew what he had to do. He'd done it hundreds of times. As he picked up the cold snow to stuff in his mouth, he didn't feel the cold snap this time. He felt a searing hot pain and flash before it all turned to black. A well-timed explosive round had found its way to Simo's left cheek, exploding upon impact. It crushed his jaw and removed most of his cheek. Simo blacked out immediately and was picked up by his fellow soldiers, who noted how most of his face was missing. This, however, did not kill White Death. He woke up on the 13th of March to find peace had been declared across Finland. The Finnish army wanted to acknowledge what he had done for the country and promoted him to second lieutenant. So what does a man like this do for the remainder of his life? He'd done the unthinkable. He'd achieved everything he had wanted to achieve. Well, he becomes an extremely successful moose hunter and dog breeder, of course. He has hunted with some extremely noteworthy people, such as the Finnish president, Urho Kekkonen, who remarked that Simo Hauha preferred to speak to animals more than he did humans. So Simo Hauha died at the age of 96 years, living a full life. And I'll leave you with one quote from Simo Hauha. "War is not a pleasant experience," he said. "But who else would protect this land unless we are willing to do it ourselves?"